What comes to mind when thinking of a horror movie? Not so much elevated experimental horror, more just light popcorn, gore-fest cinema. Classic horror, slashers even. What makes a horror movie entertaining or even good? What even makes a horror movie? By law, is it all subjective? Of course there's going to be biases based on specific personal taste. Some would argue it needs to be really scary to be effective, even though, that's subjective. That it needs a menacing, iconic killer or supernatural force or creature that may or may not be symbolic for something more abstract and interpretable. They should have some brutal, gory kills accomplished through practical effects, not CGI, because that's not realistic. The kills need to look real and convincing, but not real, just enough to the point where it's fun and gnarly, but it doesn't cause everyone in the room to run away screaming and calling the police because they believe that you just showed them your homemade snuff film. Just something that has good tension, some suspenseful situations for the survivor characters, and a few action-y chase scenes. Really, if we turn to the basic, simple textbook traditions, by the end, the sympathetic virgin good girl next door should outsmart the baddie and give us, the viewers, a feel-good, satisfying, happy ending. With a slightly spooky edge. Maybe the killer is still out there somewhere. Wah, the end. Yada yada yada. With all that being said, the point is, none of that really matters. For Funny Games is not that movie, and doesn't wish to operate on a very accessible standard, and honestly, yeah, most will probably go in blind expecting one thing, discover it's not that, feel totally cheated, and write a review on Letterboxd calling it condescending and or pretentious. 2 stars out of 5 could use more blood, which hey, to each their own, I guess. That isn't to say that it's constantly talking down to you for having a bloodlust and needing to seek release and witnessing humans being ripped apart, but through the art of film. Oh wait, that's exactly what it does. Oops, never mind. But yeah, I think it's fair to admit how strange it is that the medium can so easily manipulate our thoughts and emotional attachment to the images on screen just by setting a tone. If you put comical music over something deeply horrifying, suddenly it's not so horrific. The entertainment we find in content meant to alarm and frighten us is a complex, interesting paradox, to say the least. So much so that Austrian director Michael Haneke decided to make some movies about that very concept and other topics relating to societal complacency.
Un modèle de la réalité, si on veut dire ça. C'est la réalité, c'est dans sa complexité, c'est pas à rattraper. Alors on doit choisir, on doit nettoyer tous ces complexités sur une structure. Et si on donne au spectateur la possibilité de reconnaître toujours ça comme manipulation, c'est une question de honnêteté, je dirais.
How we can approach the topics more responsibly. So much of his work centers around that social influence, the purpose for it, the way in which we engage with it, and why. However, before we get to Funny Games, first I wanted to quickly dissect his second film from 1992, Benny's Video, which is sort of similar to Funny Games, but also kind of not. It's way more about our identities, it focuses on the psychological disconnect from reality, and doesn't have any of that blunt, darkly comedic, self-reflective satire mixed in. The movie follows a young teenager named Benny who has an obsession with the medium of film and how it portrays death. He often studies both the ways in which the violence is simulated using effects as well as news media that depicts real wars, actual murders, as well as a video he recorded of a pig being slaughtered, which we get to watch over and over within the first 2 minutes of the film as well as in slow motion. Great. Goody. Over time, he has become a bit withdrawn from society, has a general apathetic disregard towards others emotionally. Because of this and his interest in not safe for life videos mixed with disturbing fictional gore in movies, he starts finding it difficult to distinguish in his mind which is real and which is fake. What if it's all fabricated? To answer what exactly differentiates the two from physical reality, as watching a recording of something through the fabric of film technically means that while yes, it once belonged to the real world, now merely exists within the realms of escapism. This fantastical format, something that can be controlled, can easily be turned off and rewound at any given time. In an abstract sense, if the murders found in cinema are created to be realistic, what's the difference between that perception through immersion and what you are casually exposed to on, let's say, the news or X, I mean Twitter? And I mean, if you stop and think about it, at the end of the day, they are just images on a lit up screen of bodies. Some may be real, some may may not be, who's to judge based on a simple passing glance, without further research? You can memorize and tally up the kills in Saw or Hostel, those aren't real, but it's weird if you're constantly watching surveillance recordings on YouTube.com of people getting hit by trains. But hey, that doesn't matter, because both can comfortably be consumed in the safety of your house as a form of like shock entertainment. In Benny's case, this fascination with the media goes far enough to spark curiosity and an impulse to witness death outside of a recording, so he tapes a video of himself in which he commits a murder. However, because it's being taped, in his mind, this makes it more of like a visual art form. That film is like the canvas, and the murder is the performative art. Another piece of this that is carefully dissected is the disconnection Benny's parents have towards their son, and the reality of the situation once they watch the murder tape. They appear almost like intrigued by how Benny could do such a thing. But their instinct is to protect their son from repercussions, not only for Benny's sake, though also specifically his father, wanting to protect his career, doesn't want to be identified as the father of a murderer, begins rationalizing Benny's transgressive behavior, as well as the hypothetical outcome best case scenario. Eventually, they settle on disposing of the body and convincing themselves that by doing this, everything will blow over and they can move on and go about their lives, without recognizing the greater concern over Benny's mental state and the person who is now, dead. And it takes them quite a ways into the movie to let that sink in. So yeah, Benny's video really attempts to demonstrate the neglect and general apathy characterized by upper middle class attitudes, that it's way more important for Benny's parents to preserve their reputation in society than to fully face the horrific realities placed right in front of them. So that's interesting. Funny Games also plays around with hierarchies, specifically the leverage that the two antagonistic intruders have over the family, and also very much us willingly going along to see what happens next. Like, what if we're also partially responsible for allowing the suffering to continue happening as we keep watching? At the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to the pure archetypical family: Anna, George, and their son Georgie, and their pet dog Rolf. We don't really know much about them, but we know that they're headed to their getaway vacation home, where they can play golf, jump in the lake, and enjoy the luxuries. Tune out the rest of the world. It's an escape, kind of like us watching a film perhaps. You know, it's a safe haven to travel to in order to experience what we aren't used to experiencing in our typical, boring, tiring day-to-day life. It's our own mini vacation for a couple of hours. Similar to how you plan a trip, depending on the genre, you have at least a minor preconception for what you might be in for, based on the genre, some of the tropes, the cliches, whatever. So right off the bat, it's showcasing a parallel between us watching and the characters on screen. They see the world through a tight lens, living in blissful ignorance, until being confronted later on by the harsh reality and the horrors that they have simply ignored or just haven't given much thought to. Similar to how we start the film ready for some thrills and brutality, only for the depraved killers to soon constantly break the fourth wall to make known that they are aware of our existence and how we too secretly crave to see and engage with terrible acts without physically doing it ourselves. They're the ones wanting to satirically mock and entertain this idea of giving our brains that adrenaline rush to accommodate our blissful desires. They're almost more of a manifestation of what we want out of this experience. It's almost like a modern take on the criminals in A Clockwork Orange and their whole showy theatrics while committing horrible acts of violence for their own amusement. It's worth acknowledging, on the note of A Clockwork Orange and its use of classical Beethoven during these scenes depicting assault, the music choices in the opening scene of Funny Games are also pretty interesting. As the family are driving along, they are diegetically listening to classical opera music, which not only puts our guard down and eases the viewer into a state of peace and comfort, but also this allows us to establish the protagonists, before suddenly the title card pops up and juxtaposes this sound for this loud, shrieking, non-diegetic jazz grind music, instantly throwing you off and contrasts what we see on screen, preventing us from forming this true parasocial relationship with the family. Once they arrive at their summer home after greeting their neighbors, Eva and Fred, as they settle in, the family are paid a visit separately by two young guys dressed in golf apparel, who are supposedly staying with Fred and Eva. We first are introduced to Paul, then shortly after by Peter, who stops by to ask if he can borrow a few eggs. Anna obliges, showing him some good hospitality. However, on his way out, he accidentally drops them, though Anna tells him that it's no big deal and assures him that they don't eat eggs all that often anyway, before giving him some more, only this time wrapped up. This back and forth smile and pretend I don't actually want to kick you out of my house, must protect and enforce social orders, escalates. First, he clumsily drops the eggs, next he accidentally knocks her phone into the sink full of water, and is generally testing her patience to see how long her kindness and hospitality will last before turning hostile, when she's gonna crack, similar to the eggs. Through various means, Peter and now also Paul end up sticking around, much to Anne's increasing chagrin, until eventually she outwardly instructs them to leave her property. After noticing that these two guests are overstaying their welcome and are starting to assert control over Anna, as now her hosts, she's no longer willing to play along in this little game. Sensing that the tables are now turning, for she, along with us spectating, are now realizing that this might all be one big trap. And Michael Haneke cleverly has us right where he fucking wants us. Just as things are getting ugly, George walks in to see what all the commotion's about. Peter blames Anna, saying all they wanted were some eggs, which they still haven't gotten since Peter has dropped the eggs both times now. Anna, who has grown tired of all of this, hands the rest of the eggs to George to decide whether he wants to give it to them or not, as she walks away, needing a moment to herself. George, uncertain by all of this, takes the role as mediator and simply asks them to leave. But once Paul begins speaking in an authoritative manner, insisting for him to hand the eggs over, claiming it's a simple request, George tells him to watch his tone, but Paul keeps on, telling him to either hand over the eggs or they're going to smash his 2 eggs. George responds to this by smacking Paul in the face, and so Peter smacks George with a golf club. When Anna walks back into the room, the two proclaim that George started it and Peter was only trying to defend his friend. So things are gradually getting set in motion and the sadistic mental games are unfolding. However, Peter and especially Paul still retain their manners and eloquence, despite the fact that they are not only imposing but also likely just fracture George's knee, meaning he can't defend his family because in reality, injuries have consequences and not everyone can be a cool action badass and shrug it off because it's fiction. Of course, there's also that key moment where they ask the perpetrators why they're doing all this in the first place. What is the point? What is the objective here? Their answer is because, well, why not? I mean, why am I watching this movie? Why are you watching this video? Because why not? We can attempt to understand the unknown, but like, can we ever truly mentally comprehend it? Probably not. Later on, George asks them once again why they're doing all this, and so Paul in turn comes up with various tragic backstories to blame for their behavior, all of which said sarcastically to show how absurd and irrelevant this all is. I mean, they also jokingly refer to themselves as Tom and Jerry, as well as Beavis and Butthead.
Okay, Tom. Okay, Jerry.
The truth is, similar to the antagonistic pair, we want to see where this will go, how it will culminate, when and where it will end, and why. In the realms of entertainment, the victims are usually, at the end of the day, just written to be shallow fodder for our own amusement. It's more interesting to create an intriguing aura around the one causing the murders, so when the victims get axed off, we don't feel much attachment to who they are as people. The villains, on the other hand, well, if we give them a motive for doing this, it allows us to understand the cruelty they oppose onto others, maybe even relate to them on some degree. Though that's not Haneke's intent. He doesn't want us to simply feel bad for Paul and Peter through backstory. He wants us to admit that we have greater empathy for the family, the victims, to make us question why we ever root for the violence against them in the first place. After telling their fabricated origin stories, Paul hatches a bet that the family will bet by morning that they will all be alive, and Paul bets that in 12 hours the whole family will be kaput. After this, Paul breaks the fourth wall to directly ask the viewer whose side they are on. Which team are we rooting for? He then establishes a new game called Cat in a Sack, where Paul places a pillowcase over Georgie's head to protect his innocence, as they proceed by forcing Anna to strip down so that they can critique her body, or else Georgie will suffocate. Now, they don't ask or force her directly, that would be impolite. They're kind of like Jigsaw. They give people a choice. They aren't murderers. No. Instead, they instruct George to convince his wife to take her clothes off so Paul and Peter can objectify her, or else their son will die. Funny games. Despite this scene's uncomfortable nature, it isn't filmed in an exploitative way for whoever gets off to this, as the camera only ever frames from the neck up, so all you can do is focus on the raw emotion. Once Paul has made his point, he allows Anna to get dressed and ends the game of cat in a sack. However, Georgie ends up breaking free from the restraints, and so Paul chases after him, while Peter stays behind to watch over George and Anna. During this time, they ask him why he doesn't just kill them, and he responds by reminding them the importance of entertainment. Peter then remembers the main reason all of this started in the first place and goes to the kitchen to grab the rest of the eggs. When he comes back, he sees Anna trying to break free, and while moving her back to the couch, the carton of eggs drops and breaks once again, meaning now they don't have any eggs left, so that can't be good. Up to this point, we believe Peter only asked for the eggs because the family next door sent him over, though what if I told you that was all a lie and was just a catalyst in their scheme to spark conflict? Why am I so sure? Well, Georgie swims his way next door as Paul chases close behind, only to find inside that the neighbors we first meet at the beginning of the film, who sent Peter over to get some eggs, are already dead. This is important information to keep in mind for later. Be writing this down, it's gonna be on the test. For now though, Georgie finds a gun, and Peter puts on the heavy metal music from the film's opening credits, thus reinforcing this idea of blurring the lines between reality and fiction, the diegetic and the non-diegetic. You know, this is the exciting part of the film, the cat and mouse chase, so we need some intense grind music to accompany the scene. Georgie raises the gun up and is about to fire, the music only making things more suspenseful as Paul walks closer and closer to him, completely unfazed, and the gun is out of ammo. Very frustrating, end scene. Back at the house, Peter is occupying himself by mindlessly flipping through the television, only to find natural disaster footage and a drag race. Paul walks in with Georgie, and the pair come up with a new game. They put one bullet in the shotgun before randomly selecting who's going to play along. Paul, meanwhile, goes to the kitchen to make a sandwich, and the camera lingers on him the entire time. Never cuts back to the other room, until all of a sudden we hear a gunshot, followed by some screaming. However, Paul goes about what he's doing, completely tuned out, doesn't give a shit. Once he walks back into the room, the camera focuses directly on the TV screen, still playing the drag race from earlier, only now covered in blood. During this scene, we are compelled to know what the characters' fates are, to know who will win the race, but are instead subjected to Paul nonchalantly making a sandwich in the other room. As if we at home just sat on the remote and accidentally switched to the cooking channel and are now missing all the excitement. Only to cut back to the drag race to instantly be met with the horrificness of the situation. None of it matters now. Paul gets onto Peter for being trigger happy, and they just decide to leave. Not only the house, but for quite a while the movie. And for the next 11 minutes, it's a one-take shot of Anna sitting next to her son's dead body trying to process what just happened. She makes her way over to George, and the two just cry and grieve for minutes. She then lifts George up and helps assist him out of the room. Again, the camera doesn't cut once during the scene. At one point, Anna looks over and gets her first real look at Georgie's corpse, graphically displayed in the corner, breaks down into tears, and then when we exit the room, she vomits. I swear, no one ever has this reaction in any other movie. They just see a body and it's like,
holy shit, is that a dead body?
Anna manages to escape the house and goes to retrieve help, while George stays behind and attempts to fix the water-lodged phone. The pacing of these scenes preceding the death of Georgie all feel boring, extra dragged out, almost to a painful degree, all to prove that we secretly have always been on the side of the antagonists because, while yes, what they're doing is awful, they made things interesting for us. We're also used to films where, after the first kill in Act 2, the pacing only accelerates into its third act. The action builds and the stakes are at their absolute highest. But here, Haneke chooses the opposite. After Georgie's death, everything immediately slows down. This allows the impact to only further sink in. It's not meant to simply happen before quickly moving on. You know, it's all fun and games until someone gets hurt. When George finally gets the phone to turn on, he calls the police. However, the battery is too low to reach them. It gets our hopes up after such a long, drawn-out sequence, only for things to instantly backfire. The same thing happens for Anna, Anna. She makes it just far enough, spots somebody driving towards her in the distance, a sign of hope. Turns out upon discovery, it was Paul and Peter, who take her back to the house to finish the game. We, the audience, want character development. We want a satisfying conclusion. Even if Anna and George want the games to stop, we still haven't reached the story's resolution. We still need to know who will win the bet, which side will make it out of all of this. The next game, like the previous, they choose who's going to die next. But this time, Paul is there to ensure Peter doesn't get trigger happy and ruin the structure of the game for us watching. After counting, they land on George, though this time Anna is tasked to decide how he dies. Either the painful, prolonged knife kill or the quicker but also more brutal shotgun kill. He first has her perform a little prayer. After she successfully does this, Paul asks her to recite the prayer backwards for the Olympic gold. If she can do this without messing up, she can choose not only who dies first, but again by which device. This is where the themes of control and power in this universe really take center stage. In terms of chaos and uncertainty, it's common for people to turn to spirituality, the highest form of power, knowledge, and control, thereby allowing us to rationalize our fears. But also, the position of the camera and where Paul stands almost implies that he is this godlike dictator. If Anna has free will right now, it sure doesn't seem that way. She has to do exactly what Paul says, so what is the purpose in praying in hopes of that miraculously changing? Surely he knows what's going to happen next. How much power or say does God have in any given circumstance, or is he somewhat ambivalent to these actions? Maybe like us, he's simply a spectator watching the world the same way we the viewers are watching this movie, looking down on the wrongdoings on a moralistic level without the ability to change the circumstances, to rewrite the narrative. Man, I'm really starting to sound like Carlin.
The 10 Commandments: honor thy father and mother, obedience, respect for authority. Just another name for controlling people. The truth is, obedience and respect should not be automatic. They should be earned. They should be based on the parent's performance.
Basically, it's challenging the spiritual metaphysics through symbolism, Paul as God, Anna as the believer, to criticize how one-sided it is in terms of power dynamics, and the importance praying has in a set reality. While Paul is distracted, Anna grabs the shotgun and shoots Peter. But since you can't simply kill a leader, this godlike figure, Peter quickly locates the remote control, then rewinds the film, preventing Anna from getting the upper hand. He has the ability to travel through the fabrics of film, because in actuality, the family never had any say in any of this from the start. They never really had free will. So since she went against Paul, went against their system, Anne has to watch as her husband is shot. The two proceed to take her out on the boat in the early morning, just so that they can in turn casually dispose of her body without any challenge or struggle. After all this time, they all ended up dying, and Paul and Peter made it out scot-free, thereby winning the bet. On their way back to shore, they discuss the abstract illusion of reality within fiction, how our senses connect us to reality, though film is a visual medium. How do we draw a distinction? Just as the themes explored in Benny's video, what are the lines and where are they drawn? The two describe a movie within their universe, a science fiction film, so they're discussing their fiction. But in context, it's meta, because they exist within the world of funny games. They themselves are fictional characters that I'm describing right now. However, that's not the only thing. The real ending of the film isn't a conclusion at all. As the two get off the boat, Paul walks up to the next house and asks if he can borrow some eggs. And then it hits you. The family we've been watching for the last hour and 50 minutes was just one family being tortured in a larger house-to-house scheme that was going on and has been subtly implied from the get-go. You see, at the beginning of the film, we are introduced to the family as they drive up to their lakeside house. They stop and greet the neighbors, who are accompanied by Paul and Peter, jump to after they settle in, and the father of the family next door, Fred, drops by with Paul, who seems to be familiarizing himself. This is important, as after this, they are never seen again until Georgie goes over and finds their corpses. Specifically, he finds the youngest daughter, who was around his age, who likely also died with the same shotgun that he finds that ends up being the cause of his death. Once Paul and Peter start antagonizing our protagonists, George has his leg broken and we find out that Rolf is dead. After Anna finds the dog through a game of hot and cold, they see another family docking and Anna has to act like nothing is going on, as Paul, like he did with Fred, stands awkwardly to the side asking some general questions. Then our central family all die before they knock on the new family's door asking for eggs, and this cycle just continues over and over. It's all interwoven and branching from family to family. Unlike in other horror films, for instance The Strangers, The Purge, or Hush, where the home invaders wear creepy masks that make them instantly stand out as strange, likely dangerous, it's pretty idealistic to help create an iconic look for the antagonists. However, here, Paul and Peter on the surface don't appear to be much of a threat initially. Just two average guys you would never expect could be capable of doing something so fantastically abstract and otherworldly as killing another human. For us to constantly be theorizing the true reason for which they do, to rationalize the unknown, is perhaps, and hear me out, melting our own minds. As if the concept is so phantasmagoric within our psyche. We have to learn how they work, all the intricate details. By the year 1997, when Funny Games was released, Scream was a recent major success for its blend of meta references, satire, and creating a new masked killer for the slasher genre. Which is kind of funny because Ghostface isn't one single killer, it's a facade that multiple people throughout the franchise take on. Ghostface isn't even really a character, but I digress. Scream set out wanting to be the party slasher film. You know, where we all sit around drinking, eating popcorn with friends, pointing out all the silly tropes and cliches, but the movie still plays by an idealistic code that strikes a chord with the fan base. It only minorly critiques the framework of the genre, but in a marketable, viewer-satisfying way. But maybe that's just me, I don't know. Funny Games, on the other hand, while being meta, took things a step farther by ripping the catharsis we achieved through entertainment right out from under us, leaving the viewer with just the most awful, upsetting bits that has you questioning your morbid fascination towards violence and gore in the first place. What is the appeal? Why do I like it? Why do other people like it? Why has it gotten more explicit over time? Maybe there's something deeper here. At what point does this go from fun, mindless entertainment on a screen to something much more complexly damaging to one's mental health and just overall outlook? Unfortunately, that's a whole other topic of pipelines and rabbit holes on the dark web, the disturbing movie scale. We're gonna stop here. I don't even think this is on the iceberg. Lame. We made it this far. Thank you so much for watching and listening to everything I had to say. I very much appreciate it. I know attention spans are limited, so it really does mean a lot to me that you stuck around. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, consider subscribing and liking this video. That way my brain can release some good old dopamine. Very cool. Let me know in the comments any thoughts you have about Funny Games, or I don't know, how's your day been? I hope to see you in the next one. The next life, not the next video. All right, goodbye.